Hello and welcome to Grief School, part of Good Grief Festival. This session is on grief following a stillbirth. My name's Dr. Lucy Selman. I'm a researcher at the University of Bristol and the founding director of Good Grief Festival. This session is really close to my heart. 2.5 years ago, our second daughter, Ada, was stillborn, and it was this traumatic experience which inspired the creation of Good Grief Festival. I hope this session gives you some insight into what it's like to experience stillbirth, how you can support parents going through this experience, and the support that's available if you too have had something like this happen to you. I'm delighted to be joined by 6 speakers today. First, Dr. Dania Bakbaki, an obstetrics and gynecology doctor currently studying a PhD at the University of Bristol. Dania's research aims to understand the health impact of stillbirth and neonatal death to help improve research and the standards of care received by parents. As part of her study, Dr. Bakbaki has interviewed bereaved parents from across the UK to investigate what their experiences of grief have been and what impact it's had, and she'll be sharing findings from this work with us today. Our second speaker is Dr. Christy Burden, a consultant senior lecturer and head of the Academic Women's Health Unit at the University of Bristol. She and the team at the university have conducted seminal research in the areas of high-risk pregnancy and perinatal loss. Third, we have Mary Lynch, a clinical midwife at North Bristol NHS Trust. Mary is a midwife on the labour ward and has a specific interest in bereavement care, supporting families whose babies have died. She's worked with Dania and Christy on studies investigating parents' involvement in medical reviews following their baby's death and ongoing research into projects related to baby loss. We then have 3 speakers from Bristol SANS, the Stillbirth and Neonatal Death Charity. SANS exists to reduce the number of babies dying and to ensure that anyone affected by the death of a baby receives the best possible care and support for as long as they need it, wherever they are in the UK. The first parent joining us is Kaeti Morrison, who lost her daughter Ella in February 2007. Kaeti is the secretary at Bristol SANS and a befriender providing peer support. We also have Peter Byrom, a bereaved father whose first son, Thomas, was born sleeping in January 2004. Peter is also a befriender and looks after Bristol SANS' social media and football team. And last but not least, we have Natalie LaGrange, a primary school teacher from North Somerset and a committee member of Bristol SANS, which supported Natalie and her family after the devastating loss of their daughter Aurora in 2018. First, we'll hear from Dania on her research evidence, and then from these bereaved parents discussing the findings of her research.
Hello, my name is Dania Bakbaki and I'm a doctor and researcher at the University of Bristol. In this grief school today, we're going to talk about the important subject of stillbirth. Over the last 5 years, I've been researching this topic area by reviewing the published literature, and recently I've interviewed parents from throughout the UK to find out what their experiences have been. In this 45-minute session, we're really only going to scratch the surface of this important topic area. We're going to cover the impact of grief, using parents' perspectives throughout, bereavement care, remembering baby and memory making, how understanding why a baby died can help with grief, and communicating grief. It is estimated there are 2.6 million stillbirths globally every year. And in the UK, 15 babies are born stillborn or die shortly after birth every single day. It's not uncommon to know somebody who's experienced this type of loss. With every stillbirth comes the undeniable grief and pain that parents experience. And this grief is individual and personal to each parent. And no 2 parents grieve the same. And that's the same in couples as well. The grief can be immediate to the initial shock and numbness of hearing the bad news, to occurring much later on in life, weeks, months or years afterwards. And what is certain is that this grief is lifelong. Parents not only experience the grief of losing a baby, they experience losing the loss of hopes and dreams that they envisioned that baby to have. What's important to note is that parents experience grief no matter how early or late that pregnancy loss was. In the lead up to the anniversary of a baby's death, parents can have a renewed sense of sadness. The grief may come in waves and special days, such as Mother's Day, Father's Day, or even the first day of school can allow the grief to emerge once again. The grief can be very unpredictable, and even the most innocuous event can trigger the strong emotions associated with that baby's loss. This slide illustrates some of the common feelings that parents experience. Parents often feel guilty and blame themselves for what has just happened. They search for causes and reasons why, but in the end they may never find out why. And then this can lead to anger towards friends, family, the healthcare system. And that's why how understanding why a baby died can help them process that grief. Parents experience a strong sense of parental instinct. And when that baby's born, often parents feel a sense of pride when they see the baby for the first time. They want the baby to have an identity. And for many parents, they want their baby to be called by name, and they want to talk about their experiences. And when parents are not allowed to express their emotions or talk with others, this can lead to a deep sense of isolation, like they become isolated from the groups that they were once part of, and also from their communities as well. Although we've come a long way in addressing the stigma that's associated with stillbirth in the UK, there's still a long way to go. And by breaking the silence and talking about this important topic, we can go a long way in helping to defeat that stigma. When these common feelings are not addressed, this can lead to what is called as disenfranchised grief, or unrecognised grief, or invisible losses that are not acknowledged by others. During this COVID-19 pandemic, I feel that this is an important subject area to address. Many parents may have become pregnant and experienced a loss and never seen family or friends during this time. And to these people, this grief is invisible. I feel like there's more that we can do to reach out to parents in this very difficult time. This slide illustrates some of the psychological impact of stillbirth. And from my research, depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder are the most common mental health conditions that are reported in the literature. Having a stillbirth has an impact on society and on relationships within couples. It can bring parents closer together, but also it can be a great source of marital strain and lead to divorce. It can also lead to unemployment and financial difficulty as well. And what I've found from my research is that the male perspective is often neglected, and often they've grieved differently to women. More research needs to be done in that area. I've talked a little bit about the psychological and social impact of stillbirth. However, I'd like to talk about the physical impact as well. Parents can experience the physical symptoms of grief, and this can include a weakened immune system, physical pain. Some parents report feeling aching arms to reflect the absence of not holding the baby that they were supposed to have. One parent I interviewed reports having an annual eye infection because he cried so much during the lead up to the anniversary of his baby's death. Every woman has to go through the birth of their baby, and with that comes the normal changes that you might expect following the birth. And that can lead to a quite complex emotional response to body image and self-esteem as well. Parents often feel that the need to cling on to their previous pregnant shape in order to feel more connected to the baby. Although this might not be an option for some parents, 80% of couples become pregnant again after a stillbirth. And with that comes increased fear and anxiety that this stillbirth might occur again. This slide illustrates the impact of stillbirth on parents, families, the wider society, and the healthcare system. We're now going to hear a little bit more from parents about their unique experiences.
I think the main reason it's different is when you lose another family member, whether that be, you know, an elderly grandparent or elderly parent, that you've got lots of memories of them that you can talk about with friends and family, you know, and you can remember them fondly, and those memories will last your lifetime as well. But with a stillbirth or a loss of a baby, you don't have those memories at all. So there's the shock of the news of the baby having died, and then having to actually go through the birthing process as well, which obviously, you know, which is what I had to do. So I found out that that I had lost Ella at 38 weeks and 3 days. Went into hospital and was told that my baby had died, and then had to come, you know, so there was this massive shock, and I remember it feeling very much like an out-of-body experience. I kind of was looking down on myself being told this news, and then having the shock of knowing that I was then going to have to give birth to her as well, and then go through the trauma of giving birth to a baby who wasn't going to cry when she came into the world. And then after all of those kind of that traumatic experience, it's the fact that you don't have any memories to talk to your friends and family about, which adds to their difficulty with talking to you and the isolation that parents often feel. But the lack of memories, I think, is the main reason why it's so different to other types of bereavement, and why memory making process in the hospital is so vital, because that's all you're going to have. So whether it's photographs and hand and footprints, lock of baby's hair, you know, having the blanket that they were wrapped in, or the memory boxes that a lot of hospitals do, they become your memories that for any other family member would be kind of photographs of different family events, or, you know, all sorts of other experiences. And not only are you grieving for the baby that has died, but you're grieving for everything that you had planned in the future as well. From the moment you have that positive pregnancy test, you're a parent, and whether it's consciously or not, you're planning what you're going to call that baby, you know, the school that they might go to, what sports they might be into, you know, all sorts, and your first Christmas together as a new family, and all of a sudden those are just completely ripped from under you, and so you grieve for not just the baby, but all of those future memories that you're not gonna get to make with as a little family. The grieving doesn't stop in that first year or in those first few weeks and months, because the grieving actually just continues every time you have one of those firsts, and those firsts can last for years. So it's not just the first Mother's Day or the Father's Day or the first Christmas, it's then the first day that they might have gone to nursery, or the first day that they may have started in reception at primary school, and then the first day at secondary school. It's all of those things that, no matter how long, you know, how long you are far down the line you are, there will always be those firsts that you realise that you're missing out on, and you wonder what that child would have been like. Well, for me, certainly, I hated my post-birth body, because I didn't have my baby to kind of, as a kind of reward for having, you know, the after effects of being almost 9 months pregnant and then having had a baby. And I wanted to hide it away. I didn't want anybody to be able to see that I was a, you know, a person that had just given birth, because I didn't then want the questions about where the baby was. I know a lot of parents, a lot of mums especially, feel that their arms literally ache from not being able to hold that baby, and I know that was the case for me. I remember leaving hospital with a few leaflets about SANS and the support that was out there, and a few little memories that had been made in the hospital, and I just remember this huge ache that lasted for weeks in my chest, and just wanting to hold and rock a baby like you would do if you had taken a newborn home. And that was that was really tough, and I guess is quite a unique thing for stillbirth and having lost babies. Isolation was definitely a massive part of having had Ella for me, and how I find it really difficult to kind of grieve properly, I guess. Nobody else really knowing what I was feeling, how I was feeling.
I felt like I couldn't go anywhere. I made my own isolation in a way, because I didn't feel like I could go out in public.
No.
I was scared to see other people who were pregnant. I was terrified of hearing a baby cry, and that I would have a very public reaction to that. I felt ashamed of the way that I was still so emotional, even months afterwards, and I felt like I couldn't leave my house because I was embarrassed that I might break down. I can remember just fearing that gut-wrenching reaction in public.
Yeah, same. And I was almost protecting other people as well. I didn't want to be out there, experience, and have a breakdown, and then have somebody else, and have to, have somebody else get upset and have to manage their emotions.
Have to manage their grief on top of yours.
Yeah, so it was almost like protecting myself, just keeping myself in my little bubble, just not going out there and not speaking to anybody, because I knew that people wouldn't know how to deal with me, essentially.
I think I spent the whole first 6 weeks just in my house. I did not set foot outside the house at any point in that time. And I think that was added to by the fact that people I'd known even for 10, 15 years felt like they couldn't talk to me. They didn't know what to say. And I had a few people actually say that to me and say, well, I didn't come and visit you because I didn't know if I would upset you, or I didn't know what to say to you. And that was actually worse, because then I felt like, well, I was this person who would make them feel uncomfortable, so therefore I should stay away because I was making people uncomfortable. And I also felt angry by that after 10, 15 years of knowing somebody, they couldn't find a few words to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
and just to be there.
Yeah.
And that was really hard, that the isolation came from other people being so afraid of my grief. It was almost like they might catch it if they came too close.
Yeah, and even months down the line, when people found out what had happened, or I knew that they knew what had happened, and they never mentioned it. So it might have been 6 months down the line, and I was seeing somebody for the first time, and I knew that they knew, but they just didn't mention it. And that, created a whole new kind of cycle of isolation as well, and feeling really lonely, and that people just didn't know how to deal with me at all, and my bereavement and the grief that I was feeling, and that they almost took it on themselves to kind of protect me from it, like I had forgotten that it had happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as if somehow by not mentioning it, they won't remind you, and that's okay then, because they won't upset you because they won't remind you. And I remember just thinking, there's nothing you can say that will remind me. It's the first thing I think about when I wake up. I know that Aurora's gone. I don't wake up having forgotten it.
And going back to work was quite isolating as well, because I remember I hated people telling people that I was just back from maternity leave. Couldn't stand it. And I was, and I know some people, they want to be on maternity leave for the duration, and because they've had, but for me, saying I'd been on maternity leave, all that then created was questions. I was, what did you have, boy or girl? And then you have to start that conversation again, and again, then you have to manage their reaction to what you're going to tell them, or decide not to tell them, and then you feel equally isolated and guilty for not telling the full story as well. I think for anybody who's kind of experiencing this with a friend, is just talk to, just don't ignore it. Just talk to them, and say that you don't know what to say.
I'm now going to talk to you about bereavement care. This is the formal and informal care that's provided to parents, and it begins in the hospital from the diagnosis of the stillbirth and continues in the community and potentially lifelong. And what we know is that this can potentially mitigate the impact of this devastating event. 50 years ago, care for parents was much different. Women had to give birth by themselves on wards, perhaps next to women who'd just given birth to a live baby. They weren't able to see or hold their baby, and they weren't permitted to grieve. I interviewed a parent who had a stillbirth many years ago, and she reports not knowing where her baby was buried, and it was only a few years ago that she was able to locate the baby's grave through the Sands charity website. This quote is taken from that parent. So I went home, and it was kind of treated as a non-event. It was almost as if it felt akin to a tumour. It had to be got rid of. Fortunately, care after stillbirth has improved significantly since those times. This slide illustrates the care that parents receive to help them in their grieving process. There's the care in the hospital with specialised bereavement suites. Parents are able to make memories, and we're going to hear a little bit more about that later on. The post-mortem to help understand why a baby died, and the postnatal care and support provided by healthcare professionals. There's also the care once the parents go home, with specialist bereavement care midwives, counselling, support groups, and psychological support. And then there's the care in the next pregnancy. For example, the specialised rainbow clinics that are available in some parts of the UK, the additional support and ultrasound scans. There are some really good examples of care. However, this care, unfortunately, is inconsistent in the UK, with some services providing everything I've just described to you, but other hospitals providing very minimal care to these parents. And so more still can be done. When communicating with parents, we've really only got one chance to get it right. And so we have to avoid clumsy communication and interaction with those parents and think carefully about what we're about to say, as it can lead to a negative impact on them for the rest of their lives. We need to train healthcare professionals to look after parents and widen access to bereavement care.
I think we all understand that being kind and compassionate can really make an impact to parents in their grief journey. Parents have experienced this devastating loss, this news they cannot comprehend even ever happening to them in their pregnancy. And sometimes most parents have never heard of the word stillbirth. So my role as a midwife in labour ward is to welcome parents into our bereavement area, to just speak kindly and compassionately, to get to know and make a connection with them. The things that I know I need to explain to parents, they've never really heard of before, they've got no understanding. So I think my role is to navigate them slowly and carefully and repeat as necessary any suggestions I think that might be helpful to them. So for example, parents are afraid. They don't know, it's the unknown, they don't know what's happening, they don't know if they've had a baby before, this is a really different experience. If they've never had a baby, this is a really unknown experience. So in my role as a midwife, I would try and find a connection with them and explain things slowly that you would like to see your baby. Would you like to see your baby? They may not want to see their baby. And then as you build a connection, they come to change their minds. They would like to see the baby, they'd like to hold the baby. And it's from there you can build a concrete, almost plan in my head to say, this is what you've come to, this is what you would like to do. You would love to see your baby, you want to hold your baby, perhaps you'd like to name your baby, acknowledge that this is your baby and that's your name, and you've come through your pregnancy to say this is your baby and name it. And I think that acknowledges the baby that's just been born. And then I would go on to talk about memories, to make memories. How can we do that? Because these parents are living in this bubble in this hospital and they cannot think of anything beyond that except to live in this moment. So in moving on from maybe changing your mind to see the baby and hold the baby, you could bath the baby, you could dress the baby, I could take handprints and footprints, and photography has really come on in the last couple of years, that really nice photographs of your baby will make a difference. And all those things could go into the memory boxes that have come along in the last couple of years. It's only from our understanding of what parents need and their grief that we've come to have memory boxes. And I think that's really, really helpful. I also explain to parents that they may welcome their family into the hospital. They may never have thought of that. They can welcome their young children, their siblings, grandparents, brothers and sisters. So that really is in a family environment, and they may have photographs taken with their baby, so that indeed makes a memory for them later. And also hand and footprints we can do. And we also, very recently, we now have casts, so anything that's more tangible. And I think that's how we've evolved and how it's progressed and improved in our bereavement care.
So when I had Aurora, I wasn't given a memory box at the hospital, but what we chose to do was have a special box made up for her that my brother actually made for us. When I couldn't find something that felt right for us available online, I didn't want something that either referenced a living baby who had been brought home or too heavily referenced the death of our baby. I wanted something that was more neutral, that I could have out on display in our house. So my brother very kindly put together a memory box for us that we've been able to kind of add things from the hospital, as well as building on as we go through our lives without her. I felt very much like I didn't get to have the experiences of my child that other people got to, of making those memories with her as we go through life. So what we've tried to do with her memory box is we're adding to it as we take her through our life. So places that we go, we've done things like within our box, we've collected things like stones from places we've been. So if we go to a particularly nice beach that we think, yeah, she would have liked this, we collect a pebble for her. Things like, so she's had Christmas presents made for her that have been added to her memory box. And things like, so she and I have matching bracelets that were made by another sans parent for us. Things that I've kind of tried to create those memories as we take her through our life, so that it's not just the sort of 3 or 4 items that we left the hospital with. All we left with was a small booklet of her hand and footprints, a couple of photographs, and her basic information, her weight, her length, those things. But we didn't feel like we wanted her memory to stop there. So we've tried to kind of build on from those memories and add to them as we go through life with her. So this box has kind of been growing with us as we go. She is still our daughter. She's not the daughter we had who is gone. She is our daughter and always will be. And things like that, when people have sent cards that include her, it's helped us really to feel like she's not just a memory, she's a part of our everyday life going forwards. And so I've included those within her memory box as we go forwards. And so it's kind of growing, it's a work in progress.
The midwife is sort of first was like, I'm struggling to find a heartbeat, I'll go and get a doctor, and a little bit concerned because there hadn't been a problem finding a heartbeat up until then. But I don't remember being, I think a bit nervous, but not, I had no inkling as to what was going to happen in the next few minutes. And then the doctor came in, did a scan, and just very quickly turned to us and said, it's one of those, you always remember the words, it said, there is no heartbeat, your baby's dead. And there's for me, it was like there was a darkness descended. The room was dark anyway, but it just got even darker, and it felt like somebody had punched me in the gut. I couldn't breathe, and we all started crying, and it's sort of quite, I suppose, quite a normal reaction. Our losses were quite far apart, sort of 14 years apart between the loss of Thomas and the loss of Aurora, and the memories that the hospitals help you create, I think, have changed quite a lot in those times. So we've got very minimal memories of Thomas from the hospital. It's like we've got some like Polaroids that are quite blurry and that we know are going to degrade over time, and you very kindly have redone them for us. We've got a permanent photographic memory of Thomas, but say we got the booklet with the hand and footprints on, and we got a blanket that Thomas had on him in the basket that they brought him back to after. But for us, those are just the only physical memories we've got of Thomas. And I think it's at the time we didn't know what memories we could create or try and create. We didn't know what we'd be allowed to. I would have genuinely loved to have had a photo of Denise and myself holding the basket with Thomas in, but we didn't know how long we could keep Thomas for after he'd been delivered, and rather than, as we thought might happen, somebody from the hospital comes and say, right, that's it, you've had your time with him. We gave him back earlier than we were really ready to, so didn't have that time to make memories. And I think it's so important for parents to make memories with a stillborn baby, because it's those sort of hours and days that they're going to make the memories out of. And I kind of get a little bit jealous sometimes about the memory, about what is offered nowadays to parents to make, and and the information they get, because like we've said before in talking, that we had so many questions but didn't know who to ask about what we could do. And it's like, we didn't even think we'd be allowed to take photos of him, and we see everybody since has like been taking photos, and it's like, I wish we had the photos.
Now that there are companies who will come in and do that for you at the time.
Exactly, and to do like hand and footprint casts of our babies, and it would be those sort of things. It'd be great to have, but it is so important, I think, to make the memories, as many memories as you can.
I found as well, I don't know if it was the same for you, but her funeral for us was a really painful experience, in that other people during a funeral, if you've lost an older relative, you've got all those memories to share and to talk about. And we didn't have those. We never got to make memories throughout life with her. And I found that really hard, going into her funeral, knowing that we couldn't share details of her life and events and experiences that she'd had. I mean, as you know, Keith and I have both got memorial tattoos for Aurora that we designed that contain her ashes, so that she can physically go with us everywhere we go. She can walk that path with us. She can be with us, with her brother, everywhere that we go. She's with us. And that for me has really helped. That was something that I hadn't thought about until after she'd passed, that actually it was a way that she could still be a part of all our future experiences, and that she wasn't relegated to being in our past. She is part of our future, she is part of our present, and to be able to take her with me everywhere I go is momentous.
There is, like you said, there is that strange sort of thing that, like, we're both fortunate. We both gone and had our children since you got Eric, and we got our son Harrison, and they're that physical part of your life. Like, you go shopping, go on holiday, go to the cinema, whatever, and always aware that there's an empty seat, and like there's an empty seat at the table at times, and like you say, you and Keith have got your tattoos, and I've done the similar. I've got my heart tattoo, the blue and pink for Thomas for baby loss, and the rainbow coloured one for Harrison, and just the wording in it, the smallest of feet leave everlasting footprints on this world. And I suppose that's my way. I've got other tattoos as well that sort of for different members of the family, but that's my way of taking Thomas with me, because it's not practical to carry the folder with photos and the blanket around, and I wouldn't want to, because I'd be afraid if I lost him I'd lose that memory. And as much as not a day goes by where we don't remember our babies, it's that sometimes it's that look down at the tattoo to say, they're still with you in what you're doing, and you're still taking their memory with you.
So after a baby dies in every hospital, there should be a review process that occurs, and this is a group of healthcare professionals or a committee meeting who review the case after a baby's died to see if they can find any cause or underlying cause that's caused the death of the baby, and also to look at any lessons learned that can improve care in the future. I think largely looking at national reports and also the research we've done in Bristol, and up until now, parents have been largely unaware that these review processes take place and have not often been involved in this review process. What's been your experience, Natalie?
I would say mine's slightly different in that I was very aware of the process. Our consultant talked us through what was going to happen. So we chose to have a post-mortem for Aurora so that we could rule out whether there were any other conditions that had caused her to pass. And then we were asked for permission to take her case to panels so that they could discuss what had happened with her death. And we were then made very aware of the findings and what had been discussed.
So in Bristol, we undertook a study called the Parents 2 study, which is where we looked at a structured process for involving parents in the review process. And in this study, there would be a research midwife would go out to bereaved parents' homes and talk to them before the review meeting, just to really get all their kind of feedback and and any questions they had, and that could be discussed in the meeting. And a lot of our parents did find that overwhelmingly beneficial. I don't know what your thoughts on that were.
Yeah, very much so. We had quite a few questions that we needed to know for our own mental health, and they were able, I felt, to ask the questions that I couldn't yet voice, the things that I need to know now that I couldn't at that time maybe find the strength or the knowledge to ask, and actually being able to put forward the questions I had, but also from a medical point of view for them to ask the questions that I needed later. And when I then got that report with the questions they'd asked, they answered things that I didn't even know I needed to know. And that was huge for us, for both of us.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the parents in our study had said that it did help them in some way, not all, but some said it helped them process the grief. And it was, for some parents, again, not all, it was important to be able to ask those questions, to be able to sort of move on to the next sort of stage of the grief process. And I think for some people, they did find that beneficial. And I think, and certainly an overwhelming thing in our study was that people were shocked that at the time when we did this, it wasn't, which was only last year, that it wasn't part of routine practice. And I'm glad that you had a good experience with this, but I think it is quite inconsistent across the UK and worldwide. It's quite inconsistent how, and I think it is such it feels like from what parents told us, that it was such an important thing to be given the opportunity to be involved in the review. And the other thing is, we certainly found that it was very useful and really helped the review process, because without asking parents, it almost feels to me, when you're reviewing a case, you've got part of it missing, or a big part of it missing, because you're just not putting it into context or getting the whole story. And it certainly, for us, it felt like it improved the review process. So we found that it was really important to look at the notes, but also to speak to the parents. I think there's loads of things that you can't find from the notes that can give you a sort of an indication of why the baby died or what's happened in the bigger picture. Such as in one case, we found that when we spoke to some parents, the woman said she'd been itching a lot, and that just wasn't documented anywhere in the notes. And actually, that was really important in trying to look at the whole case. I think for me, it just seems involving parents and viewers is fundamentally, clearly the right thing to do. Ethically, and I think it has benefits for parents, but as you say, one of the big things is it improves the review process, and actually without that, we're never going to get forward. We're never going to try and improve care for for other women and babies. And I think it's the best way to improve the review process, and one of the best ways is to have parents fully involved in it from the start. And I think that's really important, and I think that's what we found in our study. So.
I think that could probably help as well with the decision, when you're given that decision of whether to have a post-mortem or not. I think knowing how that will impact a review process as well is quite a big one, because I know a lot of people who chose not to have a post-mortem for various reasons that were right for them. For us, a post-mortem was the right decision for us, but a lot of people have questioned that decision of us as parents down the line. Why would we put our baby through that? Why did we feel the need to do that? But we felt the need to do that because we needed to know those answers. We needed to know, was there something genetically that affected her? Could this happen to another baby? We needed to know that information, and we were told very much from the beginning that actually what they found could influence how other babies in her situation were cared for, and that was really important that process happened. And I think if we hadn't had that explained to us, we may not have had a post-mortem, we may not have then had those answers. They would always have been questions in our mind, but because we had consultants who were very honest with us from the beginning and said, okay, the benefits of a post-mortem are we will be able to answer these questions, we will be able to give you definitive answers, that really helped, and that was important. And not everybody knows what that post-mortem can achieve and is for.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And I think we found that in the study as well, that it was, I think, sort of talking to parents early and just keeping that dialogue up, having that contact and that continuity of care sort of throughout everything. And I think just, you know, the really clear explanation of what will happen, how things will be investigated, what the benefits could be. Because I think sometimes, you know, where care has not been so good is where healthcare professionals may have not communicated well. One, that there is a review process happening, another, what that will involve, and the same with the post-mortem, exactly how that could be helpful or what the benefits are. And I think everyone's got a completely individual choice on how they want to go about things, but I think it's really important to keep those lines of communication open all the time and to communicate well. My perception is.
I agree, and it gives bereaved parents that element of control, because there's very little in a stillbirth that you have control of. You've had no control over losing your baby, you've had no control over what happens next, and to then be given a tiny bit of control to be able to make those decisions, and to be, you know, given the option, you may have a post-mortem which will tell you this, or you can opt not to, you can have the skin sample, you can ask these questions, you can find out what you need to know about your baby passing. That's a choice that we could make as her parents, and there are very little choices that we had in any of her life and death, and to be able to have those choices was vital. It felt like some element of control that we had in this process.
Yeah. And a few things that we did during the parent studies, we when the midwife went out to see parents, we did have a form that was quite structured to fill in, and some of the parents found that useful, some didn't. I don't know what you think about that. It was sort of more like prompts of what you could ask or what you could ask about, and I don't know whether you think that would have been a useful thing. Or
yeah, I definitely think that would be useful, because sometimes you don't know what you need to know.
Yeah.
And to have somebody guiding that and saying, these are the things you could ask, these are the things you might need to know.
Yeah.
That's helpful, because stillbirth is new to most people experiencing it.
We looked at how things are best communicated after the review process, and I don't know what you thought about how well that was communicated to you, sort of all the answers to all the questions you had, and whether that was better by face or I don't know.
Ours was fantastic. Was it? We had both. We had a meeting face to face with the consultant who'd seen us through our pregnancy and through Aurora's death, and so we had a face to face meeting with her, which was strangely lovely, because she knew the fears we'd had throughout the pregnancy. She was with us throughout everything, and so she could talk to us on a very personal level about what had happened and what her answers were to our questions, and that was lovely, because it felt like we weren't alone in the review process. She was going through it with us, and she sat with us, and she spent hours with us talking it all through and going through everything that was going to be in the report to us, as well as us then having the written report that came through later on, so that we then had that to go back to, so that when you sort of, you know, you do kind of forget some of the details at times of what was said, and to be able to have that forever to go back to and say, okay, well, actually this is what they said at the time, and this is, you know. And for me, that has helped with my anxiety and with my grief process, to be able to go back to that and look at it. And I dealt a lot with guilt and blame throughout her death, that I felt hugely responsible for her death, and to be able to go back to that report and look and say, actually, they said on there was nothing that you would have felt to indicate that she was passing. There was nothing you would have seen as an indication that she was poorly. There was no way you could have known, and to have that to go back to in black and white is just amazing. When you have those moments of doubt where you think, it's my fault, I caused this, to be able to look back and say, actually, no, look, a panel of people said, it's not your fault, you didn't do this.
I think that's amazing. I think you've just summarised so clearly why it's so important that because you clearly had a good kind of experience, and I think it's just so, you summarise so clearly why that's important, that people do have that, and I think that's really vital.
For me, just saying I'm sorry, if they didn't know what else to say, which most people don't, is massive.
And hearing our babies' names.
Yeah.
Because I felt like people considered that we had lost a pregnancy, not a baby. And hearing people say Aurora's name was massive for us to have them humanise the situation we'd been through. We weren't just a statistic, we weren't a number, we weren't a lost pregnancy. We had lost our baby, we had lost our firstborn. I wanted to hear her name. I'm never going to hear her name read out on a register at school. I'm never going to, you know, hear people talk to her or talk about her in the same way that others hear their child's name.
Yeah.
And so just to have somebody say, I'm so sorry about what happened with Aurora, was massive for us to just hear people on a regular basis say her name.
Yeah. My work were brilliant, that they sat me down and had a conversation with me saying, you know, how much do you want to, your colleagues to know about what's happened, or and how much do you want them to mention it? Do you want to mention it at all? Do you want them to just not say anything at all? And somehow them just being completely honest and putting the ball in my court and saying, we will do whatever you want to do, really, really helped. And knowing that I was going back to work and that they all knew, and that they all knew that they could mention her. You know, some still didn't, so that was, you know, there was obviously that side of things, but everybody knowing that they had my permission to mention her really, really helped. And I hope helped them as well, know how to deal with me.
It helps. And I always remember there was somebody in work who I didn't know very well at the time who walked in and said, Nat, why did you choose Aurora's name? Just out of the blue, this question. She literally just walked in over a cup of tea. Why did you choose her name? And you sort of saw everybody in the room take a sharp intake of breath, like, oh. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad you asked. And we talked about it.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of thing you would ask to any other parent. You'd say, oh, what made you choose your child's name? And to be asked that in such a normal way was just lovely.
I think people just need to try to be a little bit brave, and, you know, yes, it might be very uncomfortable for them to ask how much you want to talk about it, if you want to talk about it at all, or admit that they don't really know what to say. That might be really uncomfortable for them, but they have to remember that that's nothing compared to how we've been feeling and what we're living. And actually, if they can just be brave enough to put themselves in that uncomfortable position, the difference it would make to a bereaved parent is massive. Huge. And I think for people not to say, things such as, especially if you go on to have a subsequent pregnancy, is to make out that everything was worth it because you've had your second baby or a subsequent baby. Yeah, that's just not helpful.
One baby does not replace another. You know, we've gone on to have another baby, and he in no way replaces his sister. They're two separate babies, they were two separate pregnancies. She is still and will always be our firstborn.
For somebody to turn around to me and say, after I'd had Archie, oh, it was all worth it in the end. No, I'm sorry. I don't know where people are coming from when they say things like that. And I think it comes from not really knowing what to say. But in those circumstances, saying nothing is better.
Absolutely.
You know,
I found the question as well when carrying Eric, of people saying to us all, is he your first? I found that so difficult to hear, because no, he's not our first, he's not our firstborn, he never will be our firstborn. He's the first we got to bring home alive, but he's not our firstborn.
No. And
to have to explain that over and over again, I still, 2 years down the line, can't say it without feeling choked up. He's never going to be our firstborn.
Although we focus a lot on the negative impact of having a stillbirth, I'd like to touch upon the positive consequences some parents report. Some parents feel that they have a changed outlook on life, they don't take anything for granted, and feel more caring and compassionate towards others. Whilst other parents report a changed outlook on death, including fearing death less, or even fearing death more than they did previously. Parents feel motivated to help other parents, either through research or through charity or support groups. And what is certain is that they don't want the same thing that happened to them to happen to other people. And that's why by raising awareness, we can help them in this journey.
It's made me think differently about the things that go on in life that I don't now sweat some of the smaller stuff, or, you know, I won't swing at every pitch. When something happens, you let it go by, just like, this is really so important. I think it can, you get that more
what's important in life.
Yeah.
Yeah, you learn what are the major things that actually do matter to you as a person. I know one of the things that's come out of Aurora's life has been that I think now we try to make her proud in everything we do, and it's kind of been her legacy that we try to find as many things that we can do to make her mark on the world for her. So running the 10K and being part of the committee, and, you know, helping with events to support other bereaved parents has become something that I would never have seen myself doing 2 years ago. You know, I'm someone who doesn't like public speaking and that side of things, and to then be able to go out and make her mark on the world has been kind of something that she's given to us, really.
Another positive thing that's come out of it is starting the football team, the Sands United Bristol football team, following on from what happened in Northampton with Rob setting up the original team there, and seeing the positive impact that's made on with other guys, the guys that have joined the team that have not necessarily reached out for support before, but that what you're doing in, like what I'm doing in Thomas's memory with the football team, is it's having a positive effect on other guys' lives. It's making other guys realise that there are avenues for support for them, that they can reach out to them quite easily. And
they've changed us forever, whether we like it or not. Our children, our angels, have changed us permanently.
Yeah.
And they're now in everything we do. We can't go back, but what we can do is do things in their name now and take what they've given us and turn them into positives.
Stillbirth can be a life-changing experience. It breaks your heart and can be so challenging. But as our speakers have explained today, the right care and support can really make a difference. Human beings are incredibly resilient, and grief can inspire great strength and compassion. I hope you found today's session useful. Please see our resources page for further support, and turn to SANS if you feel you need specialised bereavement care in this area. We'll end this session with a short video animation. At the University of Bristol, Dania and colleagues are currently researching how to improve care after stillbirth, and are looking to recruit parents from diverse backgrounds to take part in interviews and complete a survey. This animation was made in conjunction with parents who've experienced stillbirth and are the voiceovers to the video, which will explain a bit more about what the research is about and how you could get involved.
If you've experienced the heartbreak of a stillborn baby,
you'll know that nothing will ever take away your grief.
It happened to us, and it was the most traumatic experience of our lives. It felt as if our whole world had shattered.
And afterwards came the anxiety.
The sleepless nights.
We could barely function. So much so that I ended up losing my job.
The medical staff meant well, but the care they offered wasn't always what we really needed.
Maybe you had a similar experience.
We can't take away the grief of other parents like us, but by improving care, we can make a real difference to how quickly they can start to rebuild their lives.
That's why we're inviting you to take part in iChoose, a groundbreaking research project that will help ensure that in future, parents of stillborn babies receive the best care possible. iChoose will gather ideas from bereaved parents like you, as well as healthcare professionals and researchers, so that together we can choose how stillbirth research should be focused. Your input will help us learn more from future research faster, allowing medical professionals to build a clearer picture of what grieving parents really need. Whatever your experience of care after stillbirth, whether your loss is recent or happened years ago, you can make a difference by taking part in one or more research activities. Help us give better care to grieving parents. Register your interest today at ichooseresearch.co.uk.